Motion?
Yes.
So there's two resolutions.
Right,
Two
two
resolutions. We want to maybe have Peter explain both resolutions, what they're doing. I think they're kind of connected, but they're different, right?
Yes. Madam President, Regents, good afternoon. Peter Franklin again from Monmouth, Berlin. The first resolution authorizes, it's your authorization to submit an application for New Mexico Finance Authority financing, which would take the form of purchasing the bonds that would be authorized and issued under the second resolution. This is a step that they require because they want basically a way of making sure that the requests that they get are in effect serious requests from the governing body of the borrower that's making the request. So it's really just sort of an administrative action that's driven by their requirements. The much more voluminous bond authorizing resolution is actually, this is an amended and restated version of what you approved, I believe, last December. And it basically authorizes, it does the same thing as the prior version, but it authorizes a somewhat larger maximum principal amount of bonds, in other words, $16 million worth. And it basically describes the security for the bonds, which is a pledge of the college's system revenues, basically all the revenue that the college earns or takes in, except things like restricted grants. And that's the one big exception I'm thinking of right now. Basically lays out the process for authorizing the bonds and approving the final terms pursuant to a subsequent, what we would call a sale resolution or a final terms resolution. I can go through this section by section or probably preferably answer specific questions about it, whatever the board's pleasure.
I'm okay. I think the Regent has some questions.
Yeah, I do have one question kind of related to it on the section entitled pledged revenue.
Yes.
I'm sure that we had to discuss this in December, but I need to refresh my memory because in the way that it's defining pledged revenue, by the way, for the Regents, it's in the French page 1.4. It's defining it as pretty much all gross income. It starts off with a gross income from the operation and ownership of the system, which in this case would be residents.
Actually, if I may, now the system is very broadly defined as essentially all the college's assets, all the college's revenue-producing assets. So this is not a project revenue financing where all you're pledging is the revenue generated by the student housing. It would be nice if it could be that, but I think the problem is it won't. Well, I shouldn't get into that. But the statutory authority for higher education institutions to borrow money by issuing bonds specifically authorizes gross, or rather system pledges. And so all of this is driven more or less by the New Mexico statutes. And so that's what I think bond investors are likely to expect in deciding whether you want to adopt this resolution. My assumption is that you've looked at the overall finances of the college and have determined that you're not going to be borrowing from your other needs to fund debt service on your student housing. But
Sure, guaranteed.
all I guarantee is that I got out of bed this morning and here I am, so.
We are guaranteed.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Pledging those funds.
You are granting a security interest in those funds, which means that if there were a debt service shortfall, I don't know whether a debt service reserve fund is contemplated here or not. The first thing that the finance authority would look to is the debt service reserve fund. And then that would be replenished from the next system revenues coming in. If the debt service reserve fund were insufficient and the debt were not restructured, in theory, investors eventually, really the finance authority eventually could say, well, you need to take money from elsewhere and pay these bonds. I don't believe the finance authority, by the way, has ever done that with a borrower. But
I just wondered, that we have a limited amount of revenue himself, and obviously we're going to look into the second and third phase of this particular project and so on. How does that preclude us from using the same guarantee again on our total debt service? This pledge for this one project itself, are they going to require us to dedicate it solely to this one project?
Madam President and Member Branch, the additional bonds test in this authorizing resolution, which I believe, I'm not sure where it appears on your screen, but it's page 32.
32 on yours.
It's actually page 32. Actually, no, I'm sorry.
It would be page 127 of the
What it requires is that in order to issue additional parity lien debt, you would need system revenue sufficient to pay 175% of the debt service on these bonds as well as on the proposed bonds. And that's oversimplifying it a little bit, but that's basically the test.
Yes, the next question I have is if we went from $15 million to $16 million, where is that additional $1 million going? I haven't heard. We grew from $15 million revenue to 16.
Madam Chair and Board Member Branch, we did receive an updated cost estimate from Monty that was provided in connection with submitting the project to HED earlier this month, at the end of last month. So it was in that negotiation, renegotiating their fees, that we were provided that new cost estimate. So I think, if I could speak, I think that if you go back to the January, February timeframe when we did the initial resolution, we were talking about a different project. The project was going to be much below that. And then HED came in subsequently and asked you to build 195 beds. That increased the cost. We also talked about buying another building at one point in time and being up to an $18 million borrowing, which during the rating review process with Moody's, we kind of cut back. So we're down to a point which will hopefully make HED happy that they're financing 195 beds. But it is going to cost a little more than our initial maximum estimate from the
On that, they presented the plan to HED that hadn't been presented to this board. And my question is what limitations do we have with our developer, and that we control those particular costs and are aware of them before they become into the document like this for full authorization?
I understood that was discussed at the April 14th meeting. I wasn't at it, but something was presented like, I don't think there was any intent not to present it.
Well, I know, but
hopefully it was.
There's a lot of discussions that we've had, and it's easy to lose them what the real amount is. Because we modify things, we've had language to speak to how we can contain the costs that we discussed and that we put in there. It's until it's over, it's really, it's going to be within that ballpark. And just like you mentioned,